Hi, everybody. Welcome back to SheSpark, where empowering conversations unfold. Join us as we dive into the journeys, wisdom, and accomplishments of successful women in their respective fields. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing author Prachi Joshi Johar. Prachi is a passionate poet who has published a collection of her works titled Of Desires, Dilemmas, and Divinity. She has also worked with educational companies such as Scholastic to publish enriching brain puzzles and teasers for children of multiple age groups. In this episode, Prachi and I discuss the use of emotions in poetry and the psychological benefits of brain exercises in developing children. Prachi also gives some incredibly meaningful advice to any aspiring writers out there. So if that sounds like you, make sure you stick around. And without further ado, let's get into this episode of SheSpark. Hi Prachi, how are you today?
Hi, Ankitha. Very pleased to be here as one of the interviewees on your panel.
And we're excited to have you. So before we start, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and you as an author?
So, Ankita, I've had a very checkered career history so far in terms of having moved from place to place. And like I tell most people, it's been less of a career and more of changing jobs
Mm-hmm.
because my husband's been in a transferable job. So we've moved to places to the back of the beyond. And therefore, opportunities to work have been few and far between. And therefore I kept moving from you know being a writer in terms of I mean, when I say writer, not really a classic writer who writes books and stories and poems and stuff like that, but who writes for the newspaper, who writes for an advertising and marketing portal, who does stories for public relations companies. So I started going in that direction while I had trained to be an advertising and marketing professional. My the trajectory went in such a way that writing just kept coming to me professionally. And that's how I kept going from being a copywriter, a GRE trainer, a public relations manager, an editorial team lead for a short news app, and being a mentor to students who wanted to do creative writing. And in a very short for a very short interval, also a teacher at one of the schools teaching English and economics. And finally, now to where I work for two companies. With one, I'm the academic head. It's a company that creates content for English language learning for K to 10. And the other company is a study abroad ed tech enterprise. It's a startup. For them, I head their marketing and communication ops. And also, I am a mentor for essay writing for the students who want to prepare for their undergrad journey in countries abroad.
Hmm. That's so interesting. So you have experience with multiple different types of writing, right? Like essay writing, poetry. You said newspaper, you wrote for newspapers too. That's very interesting. So why exactly, you have a book on poetry, right? Why exactly did poetry stick with you?
I think poetry just happened very organically. I didn't have to try very hard for it. However, that comes with a writer that when I say poetry happens organically, but it doesn't pay you. All right. There are not many consumers of poetry. And also when I started out with poetry, it was never a means to an end. It was just a means of letting your
Mhm.
inner emotions get released and be able to put them in an aesthetic format, so to say.
Mhm.
I always enjoyed literature and poetry while I was in school, and had a special place for it in my heart. However, in terms of how it happened to me, it just happened on its own. I can't put a finger
Mhm.
on the time. And I used to write in college. Then there was a big gap. I used to write when I fell in love with my husband. We were dating then. I would write poetry for him,
Oh.
and yeah. And then came a time when I was very angsty, and I thought I'm caught up in a situation where I want to do so much more, but I felt circumscribed by my circumstances.
Mhm.
And that is how I just started writing, and a lot of it was an emotional release. And now and then, whenever I would be, in a pensive state, or in a happy state, or even an angry state, I think I would take course to writing, and I mean that's how it's been happening.
And do you think your emotions really help you like make better poetry?
Oh, yes, poetry, I think, is nothing but an overflow of emotions which
Mhm.
find a sort of tangible existence when you get words on paper. And poetry is emotions verbalized.
That's a very beautiful way to put it.
Yes.
So, your book of Desires, Dilemmas, and Divinity, what exactly pushed you to, is that a collection of stories you wrote over time, like poems you wrote over time, or did you write them like specifically for that book?
No, there's nothing like a specific motive that I'm going to start writing and it is going to, cater to a certain kind of audience. So desires, dilemmas, and divinity is just me. And therefore, a lot of people, when they read that, they say, oh my God, this is like a little esoteric, and we find it tough to understand
Mhm.
because it was not written for a specific audience in mind. For example, if I had to say that I'm writing for kids in the USA, maybe who are in grade 11 and 12, and they have a certain level of language acquisition and they can understand a certain level of literature, and
Mhm.
therefore the words that I'm using are pretty much what would strike a chord with those youngsters. It
Mhm.
was not written for an audience, and like I said, it was written just as a way, just as a means to let go of
Mhm.
whatever was simmering inside,
Mhm.
and therefore it was not meant for an audience.
Mhm.
And during the first few book readings that I did, I told people categorically that it is not for an audience. This is entirely me. Sounds like a very egocentric person saying this, but truth be told, it is about what I had been feeling, what I had been juggling with, whatever my emotional angst was at that point of time, whatever were the contradictions that I was facing in those 5 or 6 years, which everybody does. I mean, there's no rocket science to it. It's not like, oh my God, I was deep in the throes of trouble.
Mhm.
Not like that. But somebody who feels deeply and is able to articulate it, I just gave it form in words.
Mhm. I think the fact that you wrote it without like the intention of pleasing a certain audience makes it even more personal and possibly even easier to relate to because it's true to yourself, right?
So I've had people who've come to me during book readings and said that there is an audacity about what you write,
Mhm.
about subjects and topics which people would not like to touch, thinking that they're bearing too much of themselves.
Mhm.
But poetry is part truth and part construction, like any other piece of work. Maybe, I mean, it could be fiction, it could be
Yeah.
because we are drawing from our own experiences,
Mhm.
and also then adding the experiences of others along with it, and the basic yardstick of measurement of human instinct or human emotion or how they react to certain situations is by and large the same. Even though we say that we are very different, I mean, anything that cuts you is going to hurt you. I
Yeah.
mean, why does poetry on heartbreak do so well? Because everyone goes through it, and they feel the same things.
Yeah.
And if you get onto any Instagram handle right now, I think whatever they write about heartbreak is more or less similar in
Yeah.
terms of feelings, what it leaves you with
Yeah.
across a whole category, not category, across a whole bunch of people,
Mhm.
even generationally. All right. You
Mhm.
could be 18, you could be 24, you could be 36, you could be 40. But when it hurts you, the kind of words that you write. So, yes, it has struck a chord with people despite not having been written for an audience. So, even though I would say that it's not written for an audience, people in general, with their emotions and their reactions, are by and large the same. Some people who feel deeply respond to it with greater alacrity, with greater intensity,
Mhm.
and the others say, "Oh, okay, this is a pretty piece of writing, and anything that is pretty and beautiful. I mean, you
Mhm.
don't mind it,
Yeah,
do
you
you?"
appreciate it even if you can't perfectly relate. Yeah, I think that's
Yes.
beautiful that you can like attach to people like that with your writing. Mhm.
Yeah.
And so you also write brain teasers, correct? For young adults and children?
Yes. So there was a time between 2007 and 12 that this largely came about.
Mhm.
Again, most of my work has been a function of my situation, my environment. It is now that work from home has picked up after COVID, where we have, a standard, a 9 to 5 occupation, or we can say this is the job that I do. Like I said, I kept moving places, and every place I had to reinvent myself. But thankfully, because I had skills which I could multi-purpose to various advantages.
Mhm.
I could be a game writer one day, I could be a brain teaser writer or a critical thinking books writer the other,
Mhm.
and be an editorial team lead the other day, and be with PR one day.
Mhm.
So this was the time when my kids were very little, Ankita,
Mhm.
and I used to do a lot of brain teasers with them, just picking up a pen and pencil, and maybe draw 5 stars and make 5 stars with like 5 corners and one with a sixth one, which has six, like a triangle at the bottom and a triangle at the top.
Mhm.
And I would ask my son, I mean, do you think there's something different? And he
Mhm.
responded marvelously. And I would get very excited because he was very young.
Yeah.
And I used to think, oh my God, I mean, I'm actually helping him sharpen his thinking skills.
Mhm.
And then with the what you would call manipulatives in US or in nursery schools where they give you things. So
Mhm.
I would take simple things like, the pulses that I had at home, a red colored dal, a yellow colored one, a green colored one, put them in different size of boxes and put them in a grid on the floor. And
Mhm.
then tell my son, okay, where do you think this bowl with the red thing is going to come? And then he would identify, like, okay, the red one is here and the bowls are here. So the one with the red and the bowl
Mhm.
falls in this particular tile.
Mhm.
And I started creating games out of that. So I've got about 8 games. There are about 5 that I did for Scholastic and 3 that I did for Frank Educational Aids. So these are the books, Ankita, where these are mostly based on logical reasoning. Okay, you have your typical odd ones out. You have your sequencing. You have your so odd ones out, sequencing, what follows next,
Mhm.
and um, and these are supposed to make children think for themselves, and
Mhm.
these are done for 5 different age groups. So there are 5 books. One is for children who are in grade 1 and 2. The second book is for children who are in grade 5 and 6. The next one is for 7 and 8, and the final one is something which anybody can do. I think anyone who's above 15 years of age would find this book very, very exciting. There are a whole lot of puzzles, there are a whole lot of brain teasers, and
Mhm.
how to put all of them together to get out of the conundrum of what that puzzle is suggesting. That is the whole idea.
That's impressive, yeah. How exactly would you decide what types of puzzles and problem-solving situations were appropriate for which age group?
So, my like I told you that my children were very young at that point of time. I think one was 4 and the other one was 3, and
Mhm.
I would be playing a lot of games with them, creating them out of my own imagination,
Mhm.
and seeing whether this is something that they could handle at that level.
Mhm.
So as far as the very young children were concerned, if you want to say what I benchmarked it against, it was my own kids, that they can do this thing. They're able to solve it easily, it excites them, and they want me to come up with more. So for them, it was like that, and then having had a certain amount of experience doing logical puzzles, logical reasoning puzzles with children, I would make some kids, of that age group sit with me and say, "Do you like to do this?" And they would love doing it. And also the company Scholastic
Yeah.
would send this to editors further to vet the work that I had done and say, okay, is it age appropriate? And all of them passed muster.
That's great. Yeah. And so much of your
Yeah.
audience is young kids, right? Like the youth. What impact exactly do you hope to have on this audience?
So during the time that I was writing for them, the impact that I wanted to create was, especially in India, we did not have anything that promoted critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
While it is now a part of CBSE curriculum as one of the must-dos in the national education policy, which has come up a couple of years ago, there was nothing being done to make children solve puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
We follow a very rote mechanism of learning. And I thought that it would be a great way to stimulate children to think for themselves and make learning exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the whole idea. And I was very inspired because, again, because my own offspring were at a time when they would be entering school.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that this is a gap that exists in the system where while we have the English and the maths and the history and sciences, K to 10 is what I'm talking about. We
Yes.
do not have a subject where we encourage children to think for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and let it not be measured by, how quickly this child is able to solve it, but how much this child is able to apply himself
Mm-hmm.
in being able to solve it. It doesn't matter, if an Ankita solves it in, say, 5 minutes and a Prachi solves it in 10 minutes. The whole idea is that with the natural abilities that Ankita is endowed with, as far as her gray matter is concerned, she has applied herself for 5 minutes and achieved the answers. Even as adults, when we do puzzles, it's very exciting for us because we are entering into an unknown domain for which there are no rules laid out. Okay, it's an adventure of sorts where, our mind is into a jungle gym sort of a thing, and
Mm-hmm.
we say, okay, can we do this? So I wanted children to be able to exercise those parts of their brains which had been lying in a state of disuse, or which were never encouraged and therefore never developed.
Mm-hmm.
So right from the time that they're very young, if we start teaching them how to exercise their brains, both with respect to logical reasoning and critical thinking, we are definitely building up an individual who can react to situations that he's unfamiliar with. We can all respond to situations that we're familiar with. Okay, this happens. Maybe the milk is boiling. If I'm used to the milk boiling, I know how to switch it off. If I've never seen milk boil, and I can apply myself as to why this is happening, and I have some concept of heat leading to the expansion of the liquid, the instant reaction is, okay, if I switch off the heat, maybe I can stop this pot from boiling over. So it's a very layman example of what I'm telling you, but simply moving away from practiced rote learning, which also has its advantages. I'm not denying that we should not have those things. Memory is a great thing. I mean, look at us, we remember our tables. If there are certain quotations that I come up with, certain idioms that I come up with, certain figures of speech that I come up with during the course of my conversation, I mean, that's something that I'm drawing from my memory.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But that by itself is not enough. How do I react to situations? How do I find solutions to situations where I might be in a maze?
Mm-hmm.
So, so that is that would be the ultimate end.
Mm-hmm.
But how to solve little problems where which I may not have been taught to do? Okay, but I have been trained to think in that direction, and therefore I can be an autonomous and independent functionary in that department. I can function on my own.
That's interesting, yeah. And so that's for children. In adulthood, do you think it's also important to keep practicing these skills?
Well, you were a Gen Z, example yourself. You tell me, do you think that it's extremely important for us to keep? I keep seeing it on Insta all the while. My children tell me, my daughter tells me, "Oh, it's not for you. You're a boomer." I'm not a boomer by any chance, but she tells me I'm a boomer, and so get out of Insta. But everywhere that I read, I think that whatever stage of life you're in, I'm in my mid 40s now. I'm 46,
Mhm.
and I feel that every new thing that you learn, every place where you're not very comfortable being in that position because you are not a master of that situation, and you try yourself a little bit, I think you are improving yourself
Mhm.
in terms of taking chances, taking challenges, and leading to growth. So even as adults, I think it's a great source of excitement to be
Mhm.
doing puzzles. Beyond recreation, there is a certain level of application of your own brain that works here, and that is a great source of satisfaction.
Yeah. I still love puzzles. I think I will love puzzles for the rest of my life. They're just so fun, right?
Yes.
So back to you a little. What are some of your favorite poems, poets, maybe someone who inspired you to start writing?
I can't recall the names right now, but I remember Robert Frost, I remember Shelley, I remember in Hindi Urdu,
Mm,
Faiz Ahmed Faiz
I've heard the
is
name. Yes.
yeah, it's a familiar name, and he was a stalwart in his own right, and it's only recently that I've started writing in Hindi Urdu, and I'm really enjoying it
Mhm.
because somehow it hits differently.
Yeah.
Even though the medium of education for me has been mostly English, but I've enjoyed Hindi literature with the same fervor as I did English. So there are a few poems like She Walks in Beauty, like the Night, then Oh Captain, My Captain. Then there's something called there's another poem called McCavity, the Cat. And all of these are poems that I'm talking to you from my grade 10 and grade 12 time.
Yeah.
So
Is
these are the, yeah,
sorry,
go on,
is
please.
poetry in different languages very different in terms of like writing it?
I think poetry in any form draws a lot from the environment that you're living in. And to answer your question, yes, the writing will vary in both the languages, in any of the languages that you choose to write in. With respect to writing it also, because I cannot express when I a lot of times I get onto Rekhta, which is a Hindi Urdu dictionary, because my Urdu is not very good,
Yeah.
and I want to write about torment, okay, and they have written torment as azaliyat, okay. Now azaliyat is not going to hit you the same way as torment. You're going to arrange the order of your words differently,
Hmm.
whereas with English, which comes more naturally to you, I mean, that's my situation,
Yeah.
you would write differently. So yes, I would say yes to both the questions, that
Mhm.
both in terms of absorbing what you absorb in English versus what you do in another language, be it Hindi or in Urdu, um, and so many other languages in India. I mean, India has so
Yeah, so
many.
many languages, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you have a Malayalam, you have a Tamil, and the truth be told, a lot does get lost in translation.
Mhm.
Because when I translate my Hindi works into English, I realize, oh my God, it's not hitting you that well.
I actually did not know that you wrote in other languages. That's another level of talent, in my opinion.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
So,
your.
what advice do you have for anyone else, any young people looking to publish a book, maybe, or just get more comfortable with the writing for themselves?
I think writing is something which is like walking, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows how to walk and everybody knows how to write. It
Yeah.
is just that some people have the distinct acumen to present it in a way which like I said is aesthetically organized, and
Mhm.
at the same time evokes the feeling in you that, oh my God, this is what I had been wanting to say and this is exactly how I feel.
Mhm.
So, to those who have that ability, I would say keep at it. And while I say that I do not take any credit for my writing, because I haven't worked hard at it, it is something that has happened very naturally. I mean, I sit down to write, I probably don't even have an idea what I'm going to write. But once I start writing, it develops a life of its own. And somehow it's created into something which I had not envisioned. Maybe I would have had a rough idea. This is what I want to say, but it always does not translate into what I have imagined it to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes it turns out to be far more beautiful than what I had thought. Like they say that, are you a lot of your genes or are you a lot of your environment? And they say that now your genes are more responsible than your environment for making you what you are. So I think as far as poetry is concerned, more than your practice, I think there is an innate talent for which you can't take credit. So for all the poets and the artists, I mean, I would be, it would be humbling to even give them advice, offer them advice. But just a thought is that when it comes to you, stay at it and let it all come out. While one would say that poetry is a case of inspiration. If you're inspired to write, you would write.
Mm.
But no, if you sit and say, okay, let me just get all the energies that are flowing within me at this point of time and say, let me think poetry, then probably the writing will flow as well. So the advice is that when you have those bursts of inspiration, please make sure you stay with them and bring out the best of whatever is bubbling inside you. You should be able to bring it forth on paper.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I definitely do not have the poetry gene that you mentioned. And I wish I did so I could appreciate the beautiful poetry a little more because I'll admit it's not my cup of tea. But I have so much respect for poets like you for being able to use your emotions to put in such unique wording, right? I think it's an art form, honestly. But yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Prachi. Thank you for sharing your journey, your hard work. I will definitely look more into your poetry. It sounds very beautiful and very exciting. And thank you
Thank
for
you so much,
talking.
Ankita. Thank you, Ankita. I'm feeling very proud and privileged to be part of your podcast, and more so because you've particularly focused on one aspect of what I do, which is very close to my heart. I mean, even if I change roles, I'm an editor one day, I may be a trainer the other day, I may be an essay mentor the other day, but I think the poet tag is something that I
Mhm.
would like to live with and take to my grave, and maybe have it on my epitaph.
Yeah, I think you're truly talented. I think you should definitely keep doing it whenever you can, right?
Thank you, Ankita. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
I hope you enjoyed your time with us.
Yes, I did.